Welcome to the White Lotus channel. Thanks for being here. Deck review. Platinu Rakdos Metal Control. Interesting take. It's been around for a while. There's a couple variations of it. But by a while, I mean 3-4 years. I've seen various Metalcraft control decks. It's the most recent build. He's done extremely well with it. I think he's got a win, a top 8, top 16. Decided to explore it, play around with it. Really fun to play. It's fun for me. I like kind of control builds by default. Burn is my favorite, but really like control too. So what do we have going on here? The interesting thing, obviously, you're playing red-black, so no counter spells, nothing like that. You're just tapping out. The deck, for me, plays out or tries to play out, I think, in theory, a little differently than other control decks. So where most control decks are trying to control the early turns, this deck is seeming to want to create a setup. So strategically, control builds. You're not winning early or mid. You're winning late. But your early turns, rather than controlling it, it's setting up through Lembas, through Deadly Dispute, Filigree Familiar, and especially Cleansing Wildfire. Anytime that you can ramp out quickly with this, you'll stabilize pretty quickly. So another thing too, when you evaluate a control deck, you kind of look at what are the turns that you stabilize, right? What's the fundamental turn for a control deck? Typically, it's usually turn 4 when they take control of the game and stabilize. But another way to look at a control deck is how quickly can a deck recover? They're not quite the same, right? You can stabilize and be at 8 life, but against a certain deck you might be stabilized for the moment, but you're not out of harm's way. So I look at this deck as its fundamental turn is 5 to recover. And when we can recover with this deck with Bleak Coven Vampires. So let's take a look at the curve real quick before we get into the game plan. Heavy on the 2-drop slots, 21 lands. We've got 4 ways to ramp with Cleansing Wildfire. We can get tokens off Deadly Dispute. So you can hit your 4, 5, 6 mana pretty consistently. For its removal suite, let's get out of the pile view there. For its removal suite, Quark Clan Shaman. It's one of the better board wipes, if not the best board wipe in the game. Breath Weapon is great. Love Quark Clan, though, overall. So we have 1, 2, 3. We got 3 sweeps in the deck. One's a conditional sweep. 4 Galvanic Blasts. We'll put that on hold for a second, and we'll discuss that more at length here in a second. But you have 4, 3 Cast Downs, 3 Chainer's Edict. That's 10. Plus Terminate. That's 11. So you've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3. You've got about, 8 spot, and then Chainer's Edict for an Edict. Right? Now, Galvanic Blast is really not the card you want to be using for spot removal in this deck. Will you? Yeah, you'll use it as spot removal on an occasion, but what you have to start prioritizing Cast Down and Chainer's Edict over Galvanic Blast. Why would we do that? That's 16 damage off Galvanic Blast, another 12 off Bleak Coven. So that's 28 life to the opponent on 7 cards. So when you go through the game plan, when you're sitting down looking at the optimal hand, 2 to 3 lands, one of them being a bridge, Cleansing Wildfire, Lembas, Bleak Coven Vampire to recover, maybe Filigree Familiar as well, and one of these removal. I don't necessarily need Galvanic Blast right now. We would like to use it more mid-late game than early game. We would rather be using Cast Down Chainer's Edict early, as well as Terminate, and using Galvanic Blast for its reach, because you got 28 points between Galvanic Blast and Bleak Coven Vamp. Boarding Party is great, but it's more like a knockout punch in the deck. There's a lot of things that are going on where the opponent's life is being reduced, and you're hopefully swinging with boarding party at the end on a cleared board to do that last bit. I highly recommend prioritizing Galvanic Blast and Bleak Coven, holding off on them as much as you can to finish it off. Let's go to the sideboard. For Duress, the sideboard is rather interesting. Anytime I see Duress in the sideboard, I always want to know why. I've not been able to speak with him and determine exactly how he's constructing the sideboard with Duress. Like what is exactly that he's targeting. The same with 4 Tranquility. So if I see Tranquility, I would expect that somebody is approaching a metagame expecting to see a lot of Bogles type matchups. And if that's what he's doing, that makes sense. If I'm going into just the meta as a whole, say like a Moto online event, I don't know if I'm going for Duress and for Tranquility. That's what he has, so that's what we played. Pulse of Marasa, red decks, get a land creature back, recovery. With 1 Cart Clan, 2 Breath Weapon in the main, 2 Breath Weapon in the side, is clearly not wanting to see a lot of go wide decks, which most control decks don't want to see. A Forest for your sideboard cards. You don't need the Forest in the main, but you've got, 3 Slagwoods, 3 Dark Moss Bridge, and a Forest, plus blood tokens off of Deadly Dispute. So you have ways to find green, but it's mainly for the sideboard options. 2 Nile Spell Bombs for your more graveyard focused or support decks, Affinity, the Troll that seems to be everywhere with Exhume. So you have Nile for that. And you've got 1 Bojuka Bog in the main. So that's what we have for the deck setup. Again, control deck strategically a little different in the sense that I would be playing it for setups in the early turns rather than controlling the early turns, trying to get to turn 5 where I can recover, not necessarily stabilize, but recover with Bleak Coven Vamp and then put the pressure on. We'll get into some games and see how we do. Match 1, Game 1, unknown opponent. Let's take a look at the opening hand. This hand doesn't get us anywhere. Not in my opinion. We can ramp, that's great, but that's the only setup that we have. And we're not getting to boarding party anytime soon, sooner than usual, if we make some land drops and get the Cleansing Wildfire in play. But this is not a hand that really does anything. I don't want to see a late game knockout card, 2 of them, and nothing else. So we'll go ahead and mulligan it. Much better. We talked about the setup, right? We talked about setting up, not controlling necessarily. Sometimes you're going to have to control in the early turns, but if you can get to your setup fast and not have to really have that much pressure on you, it's all the better. We've got 2 Cleansing Wildfires, which we can hit off the Dark Moss Bridge and the Lembas. This is a keep. Let's go. Blue-black, it's going to be Dimir Terror, right? So we know more than likely we're not going to be under a lot of pressure very fast. So we can use these turns to set up. This was an interesting turn. You won't see it on this gameplay. But when he pondered for over a minute. So I wasn't quite sure exactly why. I think I start to figure it out soon, but it was a really long ponder. It could be argued that he might be holding Spell Pierce, play the land first, then Cleansing Wildfire. I took a shot with it. He didn't Spell Pierce it. I figured the second one was ready to go. And what I expect here from the opponent, maybe he Lorians, but I'm thinking Brainstorm or he's not going to do both. But it's either Brainstorm or Lorien is what I'm expecting to see. And he goes Lorien. We don't play our land now, right? We want to wait on that. Anytime that before you make decisions, get more information on your decisions, we're playing Lembas first and then considering what our options are. Filigree Familiar should be no threat to him. It puts pressure on over time, but That should not be a concern. We're going to go ahead and Bojuka Bog now and try to make any kind of Tolarian Terror or Gurmag take longer. What I'm expecting at this moment is his response to the Bojuka Bog once resolved is a Brainstorm and Mental Note or Thought Scour. And I'm surprised that does not occur. So I figure at this point, his hand is probably stacked with removal and creatures. That's my expectation. Some people might think at this point, why aren't we just running Boarding Party straight into the opponent? Well, the pressure is going to be on the opponent, not us. He's the one that has to get his threats into play. Boarding Party can very frequently cascade into a Changer's Edict. We've got one in hand, but we're just going to wait a turn or two before we start. We've got a long way to go, right? 20-0. So we're going to be a little patient here because we want to get as much value out of Boarding Party as possible. If somebody chose a line of going Boarding Party now, fine, but we're just being patient. He doesn't know what we have. I think we know what they have. And he wastes the Snuff Out on Filigree, which draws me a card. I did not expect that play, like that creature. I guess he would have done it, really. He wants to get his Terror into play as soon as possible. So he burns the Snuff Out on Filigree, where he could have burned it on Boarding Party. So we held off to try to get value out of Boarding Party in this kind of setup. So as you can see, we set up the early turns under no pressure. He didn't have the optimal Dimir hand with the Brainstorm, Mental Note, Thought Scour, Turbo Terror on turn 3 and 4, which is good for us. But we look at what we have now. We've got 6 plus 8 at the moment. So that's 14 damage. The game can close out very quickly if you set it up correctly. If you could hold on to your Gal Blast, not burn them. Obviously, we're not burning them on this. Maybe we will other stuff. But it can close very quickly. We don't Chainer's Edict first. We've got plenty of mana to cast both Boarding Party and Chainer's Edict. We run with Boarding Party first because what if we cascade into the other Chainer's Edict? Right? Now we have 12 points plus 6 is 18. We've got lethal if it gets through. We went ahead and threw the burn spell now. He was tapped out. So you've got lethal on board that he has to deal with. We throw the Gal Blast out, make him deal with this, using his resources to do so, which is probably not going to be Snuff Out for 4 life. But this was a very easy game. Dimir Control or Dimir Terror wasn't operating like it always does. We got to operate most efficiently, and that was the end result. It gets progressively harder. Let's move on to some other games. Match 2, Game 1. Unknown opponent. Opening hand. It's not terrible. I like it. We've got some setup. We can't hit the Cleansing Wildfire ramp yet. We don't have any of the bridges, but we've got some removal, recovery, Lembas to take a look around. It's a keep. I don't always lead with red. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't. Right now, I'm trying to give the opponent. I don't want to play Swamp because even if he goes Swift Spear, I'm not burning it on turn 1. Some people do. I'm looking to set up, so we're gonna go with what we have. If you led with Mountain, that's fine. Some people probably prefer it. Now, Game 2, I probably would lead with a basic land because I don't want my artifact lands removed. Your life is a resource. You don't have to protect it at all costs from the moment the game starts. We went ahead and used Chainer's Edict here. There's only one creature on board. I'm not going to cast down it. I don't want him. I want to use it when there's only one left. It's one of their bigger threats. Chainer's Edict is a preferred removal in this particular situation. And if we see what's coming up on the next turn, we've got Monastery, Swift Spear, Goblin Blast Runner. At 14 life and 5 cards in hand with these two coming up, yeah, we need to start really trying to get the vamp into play to get some life. Missing the land drop, not good. We do get Filigree Familiar to help. Not time to panic yet, but it's getting close to that point. Again, life's a resource. I don't necessarily mind taking the damage there. Some people would have cast down on it right away, but we'll take a hit and then see what we have. Opponent has 2 cards in hand. If we hit our land drop, at this point, I don't want to go to below 8. So as much as I'd like to wait and not use Galvanic Blast, right now priorities have shifted. It's just staying alive and recovering, and we'll see. We'll get a chance to see if the deck can get there. 20 to 8's not great, but 16 to 12 isn't bad though, right? Like that's, you feel a lot better in a 16 to 12 scenario versus a 20 to 8 scenario. And they only run 1 Fire Blast, so I wasn't that concerned about it. We're going to get 4 back here with the Vamp. Now it's 12 to 9 the game. I mean, it's a huge swing. The Vamp's an excellent card. Really liked it. But you could see, yes, we went from, we talked earlier about stabilizing versus recovery. In a red dominated or a red heavy format, we have to kind of look beyond stability and more toward as also not just exclusively to recovery. So it's stability and recovery. It's a good game. It was fun. We got to do what we did. Match 3, game 1. Unknown opponent. Does this hand get us anywhere? No, sure doesn't. Mulligan. Much better. Unknown opponent, right? We have some sweeps if necessary. Can recover a little bit with Filigree. Stabilize, block, card draw. Yeah, absolutely fine with this. I do prioritize mana, so if I'm keeping 3, I'll keep 3. I don't want to be stuck on 2. You can survive for a little while, but 3 is much more optimal. Once he went Abundant Growth turn 1, obviously he's just going creature enchantment, not giving a shit that Quark Clan's even on the board. So we could have held Shaman back, but once you see Abundant Growth on this, you know it's Bogles. Let's try to get the first one out of the way. It's going to stink to kind of lose a land here, but we can't let it grow. We got to do it now. Obviously, hitting a land would be great. So we can go Filigree Familiar and then Deadly Dispute it. But we're missing drops, and that's not good. So we have Cast Down, which is not quite dead. And here's a big mistake. I'm going to pause it. This is a serious mistake that I make. Almost cost me the game. Of all the removal that's in your hand right now, the one you'd want to use is what? We talked about it in the opener, prioritizing removal. Cast Down would be more mana efficient, and we can use Gal Blast potentially for reach later. But what do I do? There's a reason Punts is in the name of my channel. We used the wrong one. Is what it is. Probably getting a little frustrated. Let me pause that again, too. I don't want to go on a rant here, but there is a great article. Link will be in the description. Very, very old. It's called A Fearless Magical Inventory, where you do a lot of reflection on why you make mistakes. Like all the way honest. And one of the things I do if I start to see a game slip away or like, oh, this is going to be problematic, rather than playing to the outs all the time. No, it's not that you make this mistake every time, not me. But rather than staying focused, I'll just start making mental errors because I'm already looking forward to game 2. No reason to do that. It's horrible, but we'll go on. I'm playing Blood Fountain here because if I miss my land drop, I got to go Deadly Dispute. Fortunately, it's only a 2/2 currently. Drawing Boarding Party is not good. Deadly Dispute, missed the land drop. Things look terrible. But we're not taking that much damage. That's the bright spot. All we're doing now, we talked about playing for the out. So we had a mental error earlier. I did, not we, me. Had a mental error earlier where I started to get irritated, start looking ahead to other games, not playing optimally. You have to play optimally all the time. Right? So when we look at this, what are we looking for the most? We're looking for Chainer's Edict. But there's a big difference between 8 mana and 9 mana. Because what happens if I do and can survive and get to enough mana for Chainer's Edict, but there's another creature on the board that's not hexproof. If I have 8 mana, I can remove them both. But if I have a Galblast, but if I have Cast Down, it's not going to help me. It can cost you a game. Play optimally. Like, he's doing 11 damage. This is pure panic mode at the moment. We have got to find Chainer's Edict or it's over. We find it. Good for us. Not great for him. With the Rancor being returned to his hand, he now has 5 cards. We've got 5 mana, but we surely need to get to 7 as fast as possible. And that's when you start wanting that Galblast back. Because what if I need 8 mana? So all we're doing here is just looking for... Breath Weapon isn't out, right? Chainer's Edict and a Breath Weapon. Breath Weapon didn't help us earlier with Ledgewalker, but it helps us now. So that's a good find. Don't need to see Boarding Party. All we're looking to do is to get as much mana as possible. Don't really care about the life, but we have a blocker. We've got time. We bought ourselves a turn with the Chainer's Edict in the graveyard. But if he goes double creature, do we have enough? Nah. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4. What do we got mana-wise? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We could have went... Had we kept the Galvanic Blast, we would have blasted the Companion and then ran Boarding Party. Right? Just saying. It's a huge mistake on my part. So we have a 7/3 trample. We can prevent 5 of it for 1 turn. Chainer's Edict in the graveyard. He passes the turn. It's all right. We got there. He conceded at this point, but the game likely goes pretty quickly in our favor. It's just a lot of damage. So I hope you enjoyed the deck and the gameplay. I like it a lot. I think the deck is positioned very well, especially if you play optimally and optimize Galvanic Blast and the Vampire. It's got some legs to it. Platinu is doing very, very well with it. If you try it out, let me know how it goes. Thanks for being here. Stay safe and be well.